It's that time of the year where you wear t-shirts in the mountains while snowshoeing. Hello, everyone. Thank you all for joining us. I'm Scott Montague from Coquitlam Search and Rescue, and I'm going to be manning the oars of Zoom tonight. Your cameras and mics are off for this session, but we still want to hear your comments and questions. If you have a question, throw it in the Q&A box so we can keep track of them, and we'll either answer live or online. If you don't want the audience to see your name, feel free to mark the question as anonymous. I'll also be keeping an eye on the chat box and posting links there as we go. For those who stick around till the end, you'll have a chance to win a giveaway from our sponsors, Helly Hansen and BrightSource. And everyone who sticks around will get a freebie from our sponsor, FatMap. Also, feel free to use those reaction buttons as you go through the day. But let's get cracking with a quick poll question for all of you, which is, where do you play in the backcountry? Is it in the Coast Mountains, Vancouver Island, Thompson Okanagan, the Caribou-Chilcotin Coast, the Kootenay Rockies, Northern BC, or maybe you normally play outside BC because you're joining us from there? As you're answering that question, I'd like to welcome the Executive Director of AdventureSmart in BC, our top-notch trip plan tutor, none other than Sandra Riches.
Thank you,
Hey,
Scott.
Sandra.
Every time we do this, you make me laugh. I never know what's going to come out. So that's a new one. Tutor, I like it. Okay, here we go. Welcome, everyone. What a pleasure to be here to kick off our summer series with a very special guest, which we'll get to shortly. I'm really grateful also to be joining you from the traditional territory of the Coast Salish people, specifically Squamish and Tsleil-Waututh First Nations. I recreate a lot outdoors and work on this land, and I'm quite honored to have that opportunity. And hopefully that's an honor and an opportunity that you're grateful for to do in your region of the country, or if you're outside of Canada as well. We have a lot to share, and oh, here's the results. We already have a few things here. It's always great to see where people are sitting, talking about where we are and what we're grateful for. Thompson Okanagan, there's a high percentage there. Northern BC, oh my goodness, Chris, you've got some followers from the north. That's really, really good. And obviously you plugged it to your friends and family and all cohorts up there. That's awesome. And outside BC, it's a 25% in Northern BC and 25% outside of BC. Welcome to British Columbia.
And to be fair, the answers are actually higher. I just turned it off really quickly. So my apologies, because there are more people, and I apologize for shutting off the poll because I'm not good at this yet. So next time we do a poll, I'll actually give you some time to finish it before I ask for the answers.
It's great to see though, isn't it, Scott and Chris,
Yeah.
where everyone's sitting. I really like to see that. And it's something that I ask faithfully when I do face-to-face outreach as well. As Scott said, I'm Sandra. I'm the Executive Director of the BC AdventureSmart program, which is managed, endorsed, and sustained by the BC Search and Rescue Association. That's who I work for directly. And we have a great team here that are very passionate about supporting the volunteers in British Columbia for what they do, and also providing great, reliable outdoor education for the very active, healthy province we've got here in British Columbia. We have a lot of hikers and bikers and paddlers and campers and climbers. The list goes on, and you're one of them. You have some favorites there as well. I'd like to go over a few basic things before I introduce our guest, and part of it is to eventually get to our guest, but I just wanted to share a few things with you that are very consistent in what we do at BC AdventureSmart. It's something that we want to share. This might be a reminder for you if you've followed us before on any of our socials or joined us for any of these webinars. I know we have return guests, so if any of you are returning, thank you for coming back, and welcome to those who are new. The primary message with all of our outdoor education, trying to provide outdoor enthusiasts with best practices and to add to their toolbox. We talk a lot about the 3 T's. We want you to trip plan for every adventure, big or small. Having the right training is critical for successfully completing your trip and reaching that destination, which, by the way, is home. The summit's only halfway. And then taking those essentials with you and adding to it season and sport specific. There's a list that we normally refer to, and then we always add to it based on the weather conditions, personal additions. I can't go anywhere now without these glasses. That's an essential for me. Favorite snack, maybe your favorite socks or hoodie or puffy. Also, don't forget those medications. So trip planning is really important to plan the route that you're heading out on, knowing where you're going and when you're returning, and leaving all of that with a trusted contact. Training can be certification based, like first aid, maybe in the wintertime, avalanche skills training. It can also be mentorship. Mentorship can take you so far. Having time with someone who's experienced at that activity or being in the outdoors, show you map and compass, how to navigate, read the lay of the land. That's worth its weight in gold. And those essentials, we need them every time, and they can get you through a pinch and through the night, which at times enthusiasts that need search and rescue need to spend the night out there. A little plug for an awesome tool that's free, by the way, to anyone in Canada, the AdventureSmart Trip Plan app. That really puts you through easy paces and offers you checklists, great detail. It's an easy tool to use to plan your outing. If you're not sure what should go in your plan, this will help you with that. And then you just email it or text it. I text it, it's quite easy, to my emergency contacts, and then they know where I'm going. I've also set that up prior. It's not just on my way to the trail. I've had a chat with my emergency contact. They understand their role and their responsibilities, and they know what to do and when to do it if I'm not back on time. This then is text to them. If you're not back after they try to reach you, they don't get you, they know the cutoff time, then they call 911. That number is for all emergencies. And they relay this to the police agency that they've contacted, and then police will transfer this information from the app to search and rescue. And then they have ingredients to their recipe. They turn into investigators, and this really helps them. So the app is awesome. It's a great place to start your planning. A few things to remind you. We know in British Columbia there are about 1,500 search and rescue calls in the province of BC, and incidents happen. A number of them are preventable, hence us providing this outdoor education to you to help prevent them and reduce the severity of them. If you get in an emergency, this stop analogy is really critical piece to remember to create a successful outcome for your scenario. You've engaged with risk, you're managing it, but there was an emergency and you need help. And that help is available 24/7, free of charge, by the way. This stop analogy puts you through the paces. It helps you literally, physically, mentally. Make sure you're stopping, thinking, observing, and planning. And this allows you to use the essentials you've carried, create some shelter, and you're staying in one spot. You're not going to move around. You're not going to go down a ravine, a gully, or a creek. They most likely, if not always, turn into something more dire. The stop analogy is an easy one to remember. So it's a friendly reminder to you in what you should do in that emergency. You're not here to see me tonight. A bunch of you have probably seen me over the years. You're here to meet and hear from and learn from and be educated by the president of the BC Search and Rescue Association. Chris Mushumanski, who I've worked with for a number of years now, is just a wealth of information, and it's an honor to welcome Chris here. Chris has a healthy background. He's an active GSAR member with Nechako Search and Rescue Valley group based in Vanderhoof, and he's been with them since 1997, so we're 26 years. It's a healthy career there. Chris's day job is a teacher and counselor in online public K-12 eBus Academy. Over the years, he's been on more than 200 tasks across the entirety of central and northern BC, including searches for missing children, mushroom pickers, berry pickers, foragers, hikers, hunters, fishers, skiers, snowmobilers, boat enthusiasts, and helping with wildfire and flood evacuations. And the list continues for that, for Chris. Chris is also an AdventureSmart educator. I'm proud to say that Chris is part of our volunteer cohort, which is over 500 educators in BC. And he's a member of the British Columbia Search and Rescue Association's Critical Incident Stress Management Team, supporting the GSAR community and the volunteers after really tough and difficult calls. And he's also then the BCSARA president. Over the years, he's heard nearly every argument from the media and our public regarding charging for search and rescue, and is passionately believing in the no charge position for the rationale and evidence-based reasons. Chris, it's an honor to have you here. I welcome you. The stage is yours, and thank you for helping us kick off the summer series of the BC AdventureSmart webinar events. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Sandra. Great to be here. Appreciate everyone's interest in this very important topic that rears its head quite often when the media picks up a story that either has some kind of juicy or perhaps controversial details, or if for whatever reason the public attention feels that the individual or individuals who have called for search and rescue services, or even if they did not call for them, were the result of a SAR effort, whatever activity they were doing, that somehow there needs to be a concept of them paying for or being charged for rescue. So thank you for organizing this. Great to see the interest. I'm going to get my PowerPoint presentation set up here so that we have go time. So bear with me, folks, as I move around a few things. And hopefully you can see my screen there. Is everybody good to see that?
There we go, Chris. Thank you.
You bet.
Perfect. Okay. And I'm just going to turn off my camera just so that I don't have this distraction. Is that okay, Scott and Sandra?
If you like, that's great, but we also like to see your face. So it's up to
Okay,
you.
perfect. I'll leave it on then if that works for folks. So,
Perfect.
Thank you.
So I would be completely remiss if I did not call out some of my SAR colleagues in the province who have made such incredible contributions. So forgive me as I name drop at times. Sandra is one of the folks out there who has had a tremendous impact and benefit. One of the folks that was instrumental as well in terms of bringing the AdventureSmart program to life in BC was a man named Jim McAllister. So big thanks to you two for having such a monumental role in terms of bringing that program to British Columbia, and it's now a success story around the world. In terms of the concept for no charge for rescue, a good friend of mine out of Vernon Search and Rescue named Don Blakely, who is a retired lawyer now since he's left the world of work. I probably will throw in a few lawyer jokes just to keep Don on his toes when he watches this video. But Don really put together the meat and potatoes of this presentation, which, or the information, which we then, over the last couple of years, put together a series of videos for the no charge for rescue position. You can find that on the YouTube channel for BCSARA and AdventureSmart, and encourage you to look at that. We will plug those websites at the end. It's also on the bcsara.com website as well. But Don is one of those sharp cookies who has really taken his time to put together a thoughtful, rational reason and set of reasons, in fact, not just one, why the no charge for rescue position is not the position that search and rescue would advocate. In fact, that's not one that the requesting agencies who ask for search and rescue to go out and look for or rescue for people, they don't advocate for it. The public really, it's not in your interests to have that position. And for the media, while I can appreciate it's sometimes a story that might add a few more bites or views to your story, ultimately having the no charge for rescue position is in everybody's interest. So let's dig into the presentation here. And the first question that I wanted to pose to folks is, sometimes you think that, the public thinks that it's search and rescue who would really like to see a charge for rescue position. And I think having a good understanding as to why folks join search and rescue in the first place is really important. I'm going to put Scott on the microphone here in a second, but I'm going to highlight one of the SAR members who is on Vancouver Island. He's a professor, and his name is Martin Martins, and he put together a survey on retaining and attracting folks to search and rescue. And he came up with 5 reasons. 3 of them really resonated in terms of the SAR motto. But Scott, I wonder in a quick snapshot, what brought you to search and rescue to Coquitlam?
So 2 things. One, there was a need, and I had been reached out to by a person, and there was a very specific technical need, and I happened to be able to fill that. And 2, I go out all the time. I'm camping almost every weekend, and I've had SAR called on me once, and it wasn't a big event. I went out and I just happened to be late, but I did leave a trip plan, and my wife did the right thing by calling in when I didn't arrive, when we agreed that she should call in if I didn't arrive. So when that happened, she called in. I showed up later, and they decided to not go. But a combination of recognizing the need for SAR and being able to help. Those are the 2 reasons that I got involved.
Awesome. Thanks for that, Scott. And those 2 answers are extremely common across the 3,000 search and rescue volunteers, GSAR search and rescue volunteers in British Columbia. Martin found that strong desire to be helpful, especially if we've got a set of outdoor skills or some sort of skill that we can bring to the SAR world, really resonates with search and rescue volunteers. I say that because I think it's really important to remember when we ask these 3,000 folks to go out and look for or rescue for individuals, those folks, their reason for joining has to be respected and kept in mind. Another thing that I want to touch on is the SAR motto. I hope it resonates with everyone, but certainly in the SAR community, the expression "so others may live" is the search and rescue motto, and that's a universal worldwide motto. I think having that as a philosophical underpinning for the position of why folks join search and rescue and are desiring to be out there helping others is really important. We are part of the safety net in Canada and British Columbia, and when folks are in need, putting our skills to good use is something that we've signed up to do. I joined, as Sandra mentioned, in 1997, and just a quick bit about me. At the time, I was a great outdoor enthusiast. I was hunting, I was fishing, I was cross-country skiing. I was a very beginning hiker, and at the time, a friend of mine that I worked with in the school system, I had just graduated and become a new teacher, and he invited me out on a search and rescue training exercise. And true funny story, sure enough, wouldn't you have it that while we're starting our training exercise, a search and rescue call out happens. So very convenient, we're all together. This time the call out was in Prince George, not in Vanderhoof where I live. So we all went to Prince George to assist the folks in Prince George through a system called mutual aid. And thankfully, the 2 teenagers were found in short order. We made our way home. That was a Saturday. We decided not to do our training given we had spent most of the day on a SAR call out. And then early Sunday morning at 4 o'clock in the morning, a second call out came. And again, I'm brand new to search and rescue, and they said, "Hey, would you like to come and observe?" and that sort of thing. And we went out, and this time it was an 84-year-old mining prospector up north of Fort St. James, very rugged, very remote terrain. And again, we found him fairly quickly. He was in good shape and really appreciated the effort that was put in to find him. And 2 happy good news stories. That feeling of being helpful and putting those skills to use and making a difference in my community and being part of something that was out there to serve others really resonated with me. And fast forward 26 years later, I'm glad Sandra's got the math skills and not me. I still am an active GSAR member in Vanderhoof and always look forward to how I can help out both locally and provincially. Another thing that I really like to highlight is what SAR means to the public. And I never really appreciated this until one time, the mother of somebody who we rescued said this quite clearly to me. And she said, the second I saw all you folks pull up in your vehicles and get out with your gear, your backpacks, your jackets, you know, your tracking sticks, your GPSs, your radios, she said, I felt like just everything was going to be okay. You folks were a beacon of hope. That was the expression she used. And it really struck me, the professionalism, the skill, and the empathy that search and rescue members bring to a task when somebody else oftentimes is having the worst day of their life. And there we are helping them is truly one of the most meaningful things that I find search and rescue members like to do. So I really want to highlight that. Why I and every one of the other search and rescue members join is there to help people. I want you to keep that in mind. So now, I'd like you to, if you could in the chat, and I'll ask Scott to monitor the chat and maybe shout things out, but I'd like to hear some of the arguments why people think we should charge for search and rescue services. What would be the logic? What would be accomplished if we had a system where folks were charged? So give that a bit of thought there. I came up with 5 different ideas in terms of why folks think we should be charging for search and rescue. But I'd like to hear the audience's thoughts, and hopefully we'll get some participation there.
I had a bit of preview on Twitter earlier today. I asked the question and I challenged people. I had a sign that picture of a sign that I actually took from Mount Seymour that says, danger, steep cliffs beyond this point. And I said, do you think we should charge people if they go past that sign? And it's in the backcountry, it's not a part of a resort or anything, but they go past that sign and they need search and rescue. And I had, it was mixed. Some people went down one path, some people went down another. But one person said, yes, because it would be a deterrent.
Okay. Okay, so a deterrent would be one reason that we might have a charge rescue system. Yeah, okay, I can see that argument. Okay, Sandra?
I love that we're having this conversation. Thanks for starting it, Chris. And if others want to jump in, I asked the same thing on Instagram actually this morning, and I left it open all day and just in our story. And I've actually just screenshotted a bunch of the answers. This is timely, so I'm going to read through. No names provided, just answers. So this was. Yes, they should think they should. Maybe it would make people think twice before putting themselves in dangerous situations. It's too expensive to do it for free was another one. The third one here, and there's about 50 answers, but I won't read them all. You pay for an ambulance, you should pay for search and rescue. They search and rescue volunteers have to put their lives on the line, let alone hours of consistent investment in education and gear. The high cost of getting involved in search and rescue for search and rescue volunteers. The other idea behind it wasn't a direct charge to the subject. I heard lots of comments. It was that maybe gear should be taxed, in the sense if I go to buy a backpack, hiking boots, new mountain bike, maybe there's a tax on that would then eventually reach the BC Search and Rescue Association, and it would support the system as a whole. There's a lengthy list here, but just wanted to share a few.
Thank you. Well, I appreciate those. And certainly those are some of the arguments that I've heard in the past, and understandable arguments if you're looking at it from a simplistic perspective. And oftentimes, I'll be honest, when a story hits the news cycle and folks are reacting, they don't necessarily take that pause, think about the actual complexities of the situation, and understand then the answer is not necessarily a simple position like a charging for rescue. So some of the ones that I've heard in the past: recoup the costs of a SAR operation. It should be a penalty. So not just to prevent folks, but if you've crossed the line, it would be a penalty or a ticket or a fine or something like that. I'm a teacher, so to teach a lesson, and so that has a double-edged sword. You could have, I'm going to teach you a lesson, or, you know, I think we need to teach some understanding here. So either way, oftentimes I find when people are saying charge rescue, it's that finger wagging and we are going to almost get you. The other one is to prevent people from doing the things that they need search and rescue for. And then finally, some folks think, oh, if we charge for rescue, that might help fund search and rescue. So I can hear lots of understanding and resonance for those, but those positions really are not really grounded in evidence. An interesting thing, if you look outside of British Columbia, the British Columbia Search and Rescue Association, and the 78 groups we represent across BC, all of them support the no charge for rescue position. There are other agencies as well that support the no charge for rescue position. One of them is the National Volunteer Search and Rescue Association, called SARVAC, Search and Rescue Volunteers, a Volunteer Association of Canada, the Mountain Rescue Association, the Province of BC, Emergency Management and Climate Readiness, the agency that we work with, the agencies like the RCMP, BC Ambulance, and the Coroner Service, all of them support the position for no charge for rescue. So when you have a multitude of names in Canada, and then if you extend that into the United States, there's the National Search and Rescue Association in the United States, a number of agencies like Parks Canada and the US Park System also supports a no charge for rescue position. It's really important to get that sense of these are the volunteers getting asked to do the things that people need rescuing for. And these are also the professionals or the agencies that deal with outdoor recreation, where they are seeing folks needing searching or rescuing as well. And all of them have stacked up on the no charge for rescue position. So I find that interesting that we would have that position so widely spread. What would be the reasons? So on your screen there, we've got 4 reasons. I'm going to unpackage those in some detail here. Oh, sorry. But fundamentally, there are 4 positions that we really find are evidence-based. So the first one is there are no improvements to search and rescue operations if we have a charge for rescue position. Second of all, charging will cause more deaths, it will cause more complicated operations, and it will increase the risks to the search and rescue volunteers. And I'll explain that in a bit more detail with some stories that I've seen in my own personal experience. There will be no financial benefit to the search and rescue community ultimately. And then finally, really, if we're looking at changing behaviors, which I believe would be the goal, right? We want to reduce the number of people getting lost and needing rescuing, or how severe the call out is, then we want to change that behavior. Then there should be evidence that if we had a charge system that would reduce or change behaviors. And we're going to talk a bit about why that is not the case as well. So in terms of where the public oftentimes gets their perception of what search and rescue looks like, I think it's important to have an understanding. There are an average across the entire year, an average of 5 to 6 calls a day. If you look in British Columbia, that actually stacks up more like between 10 and 12 between a day, between kind of May long weekend, which we're just on the cusp. So this is a timely presentation, all the way through to somewhere into October. Once we get past that, winter recreation does generate, for some groups, that's where their bread and butter call volume comes from. But really, the vast majority of SAR calls are stacked between May and October. So when you have a story that hits the news cycle, then there has to be something unusual, unique, exceptional about it. And so the perceptions of the public that we get is not all 10 or 12 per day from that May to October time, or 5 to 6 per day throughout the whole year. It's those unique, unusual, something spicy, something that kind of catches people's eye, something about that SAR call that is there. One common one that I see is out of bounds skiers. People really, oftentimes say, there's these clear boundaries, these folks ski out of bounds, how dare they, we should charge for rescue. Not understanding that that is a tiny fraction. Out of bounds skiers make up less than 1% of the entirety of all the SAR calls that we do in British Columbia. So in that regard, that story might show up and be the only story for a week of the news cycle, but that really is not the reality of the number of other calls, the bread and butter calls especially, which we'll talk about which user group or which outdoor enthusiasts make up the majority of calls for search and rescue. those calls do not always make the news cycle. So understand, if you're getting your stories about search and rescue from the media, you're not getting the entire picture. Now, I'm not trying to say that the media is misleading or anything like that. There's multitudes of stories that they cover. And I'll be honest, I greatly appreciate the interest that the media does shine on the GSAR community and the efforts that SAR volunteers put in, and the expertise and the technology, and ultimately the good news stories that we so often have in British Columbia. Those are important to tell, but there are other stories as well that may not necessarily be privileged to your news cycle or to your awareness. It's also valuable then for social media folks to recognize too, when a story gets on there, that you may not be getting the entire story. And so to pile on with, especially the comment section of a Facebook post or Twitter feed or something like that, oftentimes does not really reflect the reality, unless you're, say, part of the SAR community, or we're actually part of the SAR effort and have some actual inside or a unique perspective on that SAR task. We each can contribute in terms of trying to get as best information as possible, and understanding things are not very often that simple, and there is some complexity to it. Another thing that I think is really important to recognize in terms of the outdoor culture that we have in British Columbia, in Canada, and for the unceded and traditional territories across British Columbia and in parts of Canada. I'm privileged to be joining you from the traditional unceded territory of the Saikas First Nation, which are part of the Dakelth people in the central interior of BC. Those folks have been on the land for thousands of years, and I have been on searches for Indigenous folks where they're out being on their land. And so to have that awareness that we have an outdoor culture through all kinds of different streams, as Canadians, as British Columbians, being able to go out and enjoy that is really, it's a foundation of our culture and our society. Another aspect of being a Canadian is that our government has a commitment and actually a legal responsibility to provide some protection and some services to its citizens and the visitors who come here to Canada or British Columbia. Some of those services are things like police, fire, ambulance, and search and rescue. So when taxes are paid, services are provided by the government. Those public services are there to be set up as free of charge. Now, there might be in some instances where some small user fees, et cetera, happen, but for search and rescue, we'll talk a bit further. Sandra mentioned about, say, having a tax on backpacks or outdoor hiking shoes or something like that. And I'll speak to that at this moment here. Search and rescue is not just looking for hikers or backpackers or canoeists or hunters, where you can see these easy places to tag people. We look for folks with dementia, people with autism, little children, people who are despondent. We look for mushroom pickers. Those examples, there's really no place that you can tax that would be able to say, oh, this is a way we're going to recoup those costs. So as part of any person who gets lost or needs rescue services from search and rescue, having it as a taxpayer-funded service and part of the free public services that are provided by the country or by the province is part of being a Canadian and British Columbian. Now, here's another question for folks, and maybe, again, if we can get the chat feature going and monitored by Scott. There are a number of reasons people go out and enjoy the outdoors, beautiful British Columbia. You can see the picture on there. I'm jealous if that's in your backyard there, Scott or Sandra. Who do you think we get called out for the most in terms of a profile of person, like, for example, someone with autism, or an outdoor enthusiast, say like a canoeist, or a fisher person, or a hunter, or those sorts of categories? What do you think are the top 5 that we get called out to either search for or rescue in the span of that year?
While we're waiting for them to come back, I just wanted to mention, because that you can actually go on the chat now. At the beginning, my apologies, the chat was disabled, and we've gotten over that beast. And while you're waiting to answer that question, who do we get called out for the most? There were there was a question that came up a little bit earlier that I wanted to ask you. It was from Tom. Tom was asking, do we know of any search and rescue organization anywhere in the world that does charge? And I think New Hampshire is usually the one that everyone goes to as the place that we can actually learn a lot of lessons from. Is that right?
Yeah, yep, that is correct. New Hampshire is kind of, I don't want to say golden or poster child, but they are the ones that are oftentimes mentioned and highlighted. And in many instances, it's because of the problems that their charge for rescue system has brought on. And really, they have not taken the time to unpackage and basically back off from that position. Some examples are folks being charged for rescues that they never called for. I couldn't imagine, going to the grocery store and walking out with a bill for something that I didn't take home with me. You kind of go, well, what the heck? Or going to the gas station and not getting, the $100 in fuel that I'm paying for. I only got $20 worth, but I had to pay $100. As well as their system, which is another interesting aspect to it. In order to have a charge for rescue system, you need to have a system in place that costs money. You need to have police officers who are going to go out and investigate and charge. You need to have a legal system like lawyers and judges and a court system to be able to take that charge and hear it, because we live in a world where folks are, in Canada, you're innocent until proven guilty. Then you need to have a system to collect all those funds if a person is found guilty. And what's interesting in New Hampshire, that whole system costs way more than the money that they actually bring in for when they successfully charge and convict and collect the monies on. So if the concept is to save money or recoup costs, New Hampshire is actually a poster child of what not to do, because it is costing the taxpaying citizens of New Hampshire more money to have a charge for rescue system than it would be to have a no charge for rescue system. Yeah,
and when you look at that, you just think not everyone has the ability to pay, right? So you're going to go into court. They're going to it's going to take my time too. Like they're going to end up having to have witnesses and stuff like that. Well, I'm the person who was in the truck at the time when the phone call came in, and now they want to bring me in, and I don't want to, as a search and rescue volunteer who does help out in the truck and does answer the phone when it rings in the middle of a task. I don't want to be pulled into court. There's also efforts in that time too, right?
Absolutely. And, Scott, if I said to you when you joined Coquitlam SAR, hey, Scott, a third of your time is going to be spent in court cases where you're going to be asked to testify in whichever side, either for or against, the accusation there. I don't see too many SAR members saying, pick me. I really want to belong to that kind of organization. So it's something that people don't think through and understand kind of the complexities of that. So I'm going to flip the microphone over to Sandra and ask Sandra, in terms of the top 5, from the AdventureSmart perspective, who are the folks that Search and Rescue is getting called out? Because those are the folks that you're targeting your messaging for then.
Primarily, and thanks for asking, Chris. I was just looking in the chat here, and some of them hit the nail right on the head. It definitely follows seasons. There's no question about that. I know that we're really quite fortunate to have the data management system that we've got in the province, where all the search and rescue volunteers enter it into a provincial system. Then I can go in with others at the BCSARA team here and mine out who's getting rescued where, what season, and what are those causations. We talk about some consistencies there. There's a lot of commonalities. No question, as we lead into, especially in this official kickoff to summer this weekend with a long weekend, it's hikers on the Southwest. As we lead into this season, if you will, of the hiking season, front country, back country, regional, municipal, provincial, national parks, the trails are busy. And we know that hikers are that higher call volume throughout the summer months, if you will, which shoulders a little bit, right? Pre and post summer, there's no question. We're eager, active, healthy residents of British Columbia who like to get outside as quickly as possible. And at times in the spring, forget that there's still decent snow at higher elevations, and we still need a mixture of that seasonal and sport specific gear. If we switch gears for a minute, even though some of us are ready to be done with winter, let's talk about it for 2 seconds. The wintertime, we know it's snowmobilers based on that data. So data-driven insights provide me and our team here great insights so that we can actually reach out to those hikers in the summer, reach out to those snowmobilers in the East Kootenays specifically in the wintertime, and share that messaging in addition to that provincial, consistent, reliable messaging that is that overlying 3T message and that engagement at ground level, national, provincial, and international. We have a lot of international guests. So we know that that's who it is. And thanks for asking, Chris.
Yeah. Awesome. And Sandra hit the nail on the head for the top two, hikers and snow machine enthusiasts. Another one that sometimes catches people off guard are drivers, people who are out driving either in the backcountry or on the rural roads, etc. And then another high profile one are cyclists or mountain bikers. Those kind of round out the top folks that we go out and rescue. I say that because it's been interesting, an experience with the pandemic that really brought to the forefront how much people wanted to enjoy beautiful British Columbia. And search and rescue as a community strongly and wholeheartedly endorses folks getting outside, recreating, enjoying the amazing opportunities that we have outside, connecting with nature. I'm always trying to remind folks that the Indigenous communities across BC for thousands of years recognize the healing value of the land that they have such a long and intimate connection to. As well as the concept of Shinrin Yoku. For those in my CISM circle, they'll hear me talk about that, and that is the concept of forest bathing from Japanese culture. So again, so much around our world talks about the landscape, the geography, the natural environment that we have around us. BC, we are so fortunate to have. We need to go out and enjoy it, and we need to be mindful then, if we're going to reduce folks needing help while they're out there, how can we best accomplish that? So let's take a look at then the reasons why we would not support a charge for rescue position. So no charge for rescue. So the first one is there are no financial benefits and no improvements to search and rescue operations. So as I mentioned earlier with Scott, having a charge for rescue system where they do have it, it ends up actually costing the taxpayers more money to have that system to support a charge for rescue position than it is to provide search and rescue for free. Another thing to be aware of is those large task expenses. Many times they are very significant, and it's great to live in a community and a country and a province where we don't have to worry about being bankrupted by some unfortunate incident. The vast majority of folks that we do find that we need to search for or rescue, the category they would all fit under is unlucky. And so for somebody to face bankruptcy on these large task expenses, or what if they, as Scott said, they have no money to pay? So you've rendered a judgment of $50, $100, $250,000 to recoup the cost, and they have no money. You spent all that money to try to enforce a charge for rescue position, and they have nothing, and so there is nothing coming in. Another one to be mindful of. So what happens if we find somebody who has died? In search and rescue, that sadly does happen, either with or for various reasons. So who then do you charge? Do you charge the family who called them in? Do you charge the estate? There's all kinds of legal and financial implications with that. What if we have someone who's never been found? Where I live in Vanderhoof up north here, we had a high profile case in 2011. A young woman named Madison Scott went missing from a campsite or a forestry rec campsite about 20 minutes outside of Vanderhoof. And I can tell you, I was on that search task. We went out over 19 days, over 2.5 years, with different assignments from the RCMP, trying to find any sign of Madison, or to hopefully in the early times, locate Madison. Nothing has ever been found. Who would be appropriate to charge for that? Her family was not necessarily the one who called for search and rescue services. The costs and those kinds of things, especially when you start adding in helicopter time and RCMP time, et cetera, I'm sure it's hundreds of thousands of dollars in investigative time. Question would be, who would you lay that charge to? What if the person isn't actually missing? I've had that happen where we've been called out for somebody who was out hunting, where we actually flew one time north of Fort St. James. There were two elderly hunters who it was a miscommunication. They had left a note. They followed Sandra's and the AdventureSmart's plan of leaving a note and telling somebody where you are. Somebody misread the date as to when they were going to return. Helicopter was procured. We flew up, and there they are standing bewildered as the helicopter lands in their moose camp, scaring away all the moose, no doubt. And they're like, wow, we aren't missing, we're fine. And you know, the note says we're going to be back on Friday. It's Wednesday, and there you are, kind of all going, that was kind of a misunderstanding. So, and then another thing to be aware of, the GSAR community in British Columbia is very fortunate to enjoy support from Emergency Management Climate Readiness, the province of BC, but that covers core expenses. Many groups rely on donations as well. And the perception of a charge system has been found to reduce folks' willingness to donate to their search and rescue groups where they reside. If they think that they're getting the proceeds from a charge system, then they are not necessarily inclined to have a donation happen. So little plug, the 78 groups around the province do need your support. Financial is one of them. You can donate through the BCSARA website if you find that you are interested in doing that. Another thing about the charge for rescue position is that it will cause more problems. It will cause more deaths. That has been shown. In fact, in British Columbia, I know of two instances. There was one we were just talking before tonight. In 2021, a young woman from Toronto tragically lost her life on Mount Cypress in the North Shore Mountains there. And while it was not clearly known as to why she did not call for help, there was some evidence that she was afraid she was going to be charged for rescue. I'm also aware of a snowmobiler in the interior of the Okanagan region, BC, who was injured, decided he was not going to call because he was afraid he was going to be charged for that rescue, and spent the night out in the winter with a fairly significant leg injury. That leg injury would have been easily treatable if SAR had been called and gone in that night and rescued him. Sadly, they deferred the call, and by the time they called, his leg was not, they could not save him, and he had to have his leg amputated. So those instances where folks even think they're going to be charged will cause more problems. Another thing with folks dying, if they think they're going to be called, or families delaying calling, I belong to the critical incident stress management team for search and rescue volunteers, and 80% of the CISM requests where we go do mental health supports for SAR groups because of a tough call, 80% of those tough calls are from body recoveries. So again, if we're going to support SAR members and look at the reasons why folks, they want to help, creating those problems, creating their exposure to more folks who have died to now need to be recovered is going to be a challenge. Another aspect is the longer people take to call for rescue, we know the size of the search area becomes much larger. So then it's a more complicated, more expensive operation. And then second of all, the risks to searchers goes up tremendously. The longer people are out in the field, the more risk is assumed. So again, calling for rescue sooner is going to result in a much faster resolution, a much smaller search area, and a lot less risk to the folks who are out there searching. Unfortunately, in the United States, the culture of lawsuits has spread to Canada. And so if you have a charge for rescue position, it's very common for folks then to countersue. If they're going to be charged for the rescue, then they're going to sue the SAR group and try to see if there's any way they can pin that on. I don't think Scott or any of the volunteers in the province would be interested in being stuck in lawsuits and potentially having their own personal property, their houses on the line if you're out as a SAR member, trying to help somebody because of a charge for rescue position, and then folks are suing. Sometimes, as I mentioned, the folks that we're searching for, they're children or people with autism or dementia. Charging for rescue for those folks and delaying the time is not going to serve anyone's purpose or benefit whatsoever. And then finally, I think it's really important to recognize the longer that we wait to go search for somebody and we delay up to 24 hours, the survivability of that subject drops. At 24 hours, survivability drops 50%. That means 1 in 2 people statistically will not be found alive. Up where I live, it's being out overnight. That's the real deal breaker. The temperatures drop significantly at night, and that's where we find people getting themselves in serious trouble. If we can get out there faster and find them alive, then that makes everyone's lives that much easier and better.
It's also
Scott?
a heck of a lot easier to find people during the day than it is at night. So if you're
Yes.
if you're going, oh, you know what, well, I'll give him another hour. Oh, I'll give him another hour. I'll give him another hour. I'll give him another hour. Then a lot of the resources that we have, like helicopters and such, there's only one helicopter in all of BC that can do night operations right now.
Yeah. Excellent.
It's a pretty
reminder.
big province.
Yeah. I have lots of stories. I'll save them for later because I am mindful of the time. But I think the third thing that we want to highlight is ultimately our goal is to change behavior. So charging for rescue, how is that going to change behavior? My day job is 2 hats. I'm a teacher, but I'm also a mental health counselor. The teaching system is based on changing behaviors and expanding knowledge. We are teaching. We are not charging or beating it into children. That is widely known. That is not an effective way to change behavior or motivate folks to see a better or different way to do things. As a counselor, one of the big things I deal with is motivation. And there's no evidence at all that motivating people to change the behavior is done by a punitive measure. That does not work. I know sometimes folks have some sort of thought that it is, but the research does not bear that out. Another thing sometimes folks think is, oh, you know what, if they get away with it for free, they'll just keep getting lost again and again and again. I can only think of, in my experience in the 26 years I've done it, we only went out for one person, for the same person 2 times. That's it. Out of the hundreds of calls, that was it. And it was a person, it was an elderly woman, and she had dementia. And so again, like you go, the family had tried everything they could to keep their mother in a safe place, and yet still sometimes things happen. So when folks are unlucky, having a charge for a rescue system is not going to help. So changing behavior is what we want to do, right? So how can we do that? How can we change behavior? How can we reduce the number of SAR calls? Or if you do need to get rescued, how can we make sure that the severity is not going to be worse? As I said, body recoveries generate a lot of stress for our SAR volunteers. They'd much rather save somebody's life than deal with a deceased subject and the family and all of that. So how do we do that? Answers on the screen there, 2 pieces, education and technology. And we've got examples of how technology and education has come along to change behaviors and ultimately affect a better outcome for search and rescue. Technology success stories are widespread. I think in my backyard, the one that we really found making a dramatic change was the handheld GPS unit, and folks understanding, learning how to use it properly and using it effectively dramatically reduced the number of people that we searched for. In my backyard, it was hunters. More than half of the call volume for Nechako Valley and many of the groups in the interior was hunters. It's been 2 years in Vanderhoof since we've had to search for a hunter. And we credit all of that to both the GPS and then satellite communication devices like an InReach, where they can send a message and either say, I need help, and we can go directly to that place with the appropriate help, or they're messaging their friend and saying, hey, where's the truck? And they get a message back, or they have it marked on their GPS and they're able to find their way out and not need any assistance. Another thing that's super exciting, and I'm going to turn the microphone back over to Scott, is the satellite cell phone emergency services that are online. It's been about a year now that some of the first announcements, but there's some really exciting news coming that I think is worth everyone's attention in terms of how technology can reduce SAR calls.
Yeah, at this point in time, there are certain devices like the iPhone 14 Plus that has the ability to use a special frequency to talk up to the satellites to give some rudimentary 911 service, which is great. Like any kind of 911 service that you can get is superb, but you can use that while you are out in the backcountry. The cool thing is, the announcement, I don't know whether or not it'll actually happen, but there was an announcement earlier this year that Rogers is going to put service across the entire country, anywhere you are, and you can use any cell phone. So it doesn't need a special frequency. You could use any, even an older cell phone, as long as it's a LTE cell phone or a 5G cell phone, and you'll be able to use it to dial 911. And it doesn't matter if you're with Rogers or not. So that is supposed to be in within 2 years. One of the big things, though, regardless of what technology you're using, it doesn't work if you don't have battery. So if you're using it for pictures all day or taking videos of your dog as he's crossing the logs, which I do quite often, you better have battery backups. And that actually applies for any of our technology, of course.
Yeah, excellent reminder. It's always important with technology to never put all your eggs in one basket. Our search and rescue teams, when they go out in the field, many groups now use phones, smartphones or tablets, but they'll also have a paper map, a compass, and a GPS to back up that navigation tool so that you're never stuck with one device failing, and that was where how you're going to get back home. So many examples of success stories with technology in terms of how it can reduce the call volume or severity. And then another one is education. And there's two examples that I want to highlight outside of the SAR world. The first one is hunters. As I mentioned, in my community, hunters made up 50% of the call volume in the 80s and 90s. And fast forward to now where they make up like less than 5%. They put in an education program, the BC Wildlife Federation, and the conservation, it stands for Conservation and Outdoor Recreation Education, has a component that is very related to not getting lost and what to bring with you when you do go out. Success story. We have seen hunters drop from being in the top categories of responses to being off the charts at the bottom, where they hardly register. Another one is snowmobilers, and Avalanche Canada has really done an amazing job with their education program, and it's totally revolutionized people going out in the field with the proper gear, understanding how to assess risk in a lot more better sense, and also to be able to take a look at where terrain is safe. Those two examples are where we have seen education being very effectively used to change behaviors and has resulted in lower call volumes for search and rescue. The final one is AdventureSmart. That is another success story that started here in British Columbia. I'm going to have Sandra speak to the pillars and how important it is for folks to promote AdventureSmart when they go out, to use the trip plan app and understand about the essentials. But that is another example of how we have been able to take the experiences of search and rescue folks and have a successful education program.
Thanks, Chris. And those are excellent examples. I know Don Blakely speaks highly of the core program. I remember chatting with Don when he was with us a few years ago, and AvCan does a wonderful job. They are a national organization that really supports that winter activity and that those user groups, which are growing. There's trends growing in the winter community. There's no question. If it's snow bikes, split boarding, micro spiking has taken off. It's not just snowshoeing anymore, right? There's backcountry caving, winter camping, the list goes on. What we do here at AdventureSmart, as Chris mentioned, and I did at the beginning, we're into almost our second decade, proudly. And it's all about consistent, reliable outdoor education to help enthusiasts. And that's for residents, but it's also for visitors to our province from other parts of Canada. Canadians love the outdoors. We all know that, and we're pretty good at getting out there. But also those who visit our country and our province, they come here for that reason, knowing that it's easily accessible, it's gorgeous, it's beautiful, it's promoted very well, which helps us in situations when I get to work with the likes of our tourism organizations, either regional or provincial and national. And that's all effective work with these groups that are understanding the importance of promoting and supporting and providing reliable outdoor education. As again, AvCan, Core Program, and AdventureSmart, we like to offer these series throughout summer and winter as one example of many of how we can reach the audiences in different means. You know, we're trying to educate and engage with enthusiasts on your journey. You know, if there's ads on the bus, or if you hear me on global TV, or if you hear Chris in the news up in the north, through webinars, face-to-face, trailhead outreach, community events, the list goes on. We go to conferences and work with other affiliates in Canada and outside of the country as well. So, you know, we've grown over the years, we've expanded, and we've also adapted to the needs of the outdoor community. And we're doing our best to continue to follow and work with those trends, which keeps evolving. The 3 pillars Chris mentioned is what steers our AdventureSmart ship in British Columbia. We have 3 pillars that really help us decide what we do, how we do it, and when we do it. The first one is all through data-driven insights. That is through all of that data that's gathered and reported into our provincial system by the search and rescue volunteers. So after every single one of those 1,500 search and rescue calls in BC, it's entered into that provincial system. That's like gold, right? It's helpful for search and rescue responders. It's helpful for us at the BC Search and Rescue Association, and definitely for me here with the program for outdoor education and incident prevention. The second pillar in there is working with strategies with partners, with provincial and national at times partners. We work closely with SARVAC, the National Association for Search and Rescue as well, Public Safety Canada, and provincially, that's an expansive list from BC Parks to Parks Canada, Destination BC, you know, tourism, different organizations, emergency management and climate readiness. The list is lengthy and very inclusive and supportive. The Outdoor Recreation Council of BC, invasive species, that list, I could be here for the next hour, but I'll stop at that. You can see it's big and lots of support. The third piece of that strategy is to come up with targeted initiatives. So we use the data, we work with partners, and then we come up with targeted initiatives and provide a product. Webinars is a good example of that. The trail specific safety video, Scott, if you're able to provide that link into the chat for our audience tonight. There are 11 videos that provide in-depth trip planning, beautiful visuals of 11 popular trails in the province that will help you plan that adventure on those trails. So those are 2 good examples of what that strategy can work with. And it's a great strategy. Keeps us focused. It keeps us heading in the right direction and working towards what we do here at the BC Search and Rescue Association, towards our goals and missions in support of all the outdoor enthusiasts in the province and whoever visits to come here. Hopefully you check us out before you get here. Thanks.
Awesome. Well, I will close with a story because I was just looking who was attending here, and I'm going to pick on my good friend Canute from Mackenzie Search and Rescue. With a name like Canute, you know you're going to be a rock star. Canute is a search manager in Mackenzie, north of Prince George, and they had a little missing 4-year-old boy about a few years ago. It was pre-pandemic, I believe, and it was the middle summer. Actually, no, it was August, and a little boy went missing, 4-year-old, while his mom was out berry picking. They were out together, and he disappeared. Fast forward 30 hours later, after a torrential downpour through the night, we had 2 bears encounters that had search and rescue members on edge, and we in fact pulled out a team from the field. We had hundreds of community members out trying desperately to find little George. And the success story was George was found alive after all that time out alone and all that effort, RCMP helicopter and just so much search and rescue support there. I could not imagine a better outcome. And then to have that concept perhaps sullied, or maybe the mother would have delayed calling if she thought she might have been charged for search and rescue services. Any of that happened, I think, would have been absolutely gut-wrenching and heartbreaking. I wear it as a real feather that I belong to an organization that is there to support people, and they do not have to worry about the cost of the effort. We live in a society where we take care of each other, and I think that's a real foundational cornerstone of being a British Columbian and Canadian. So Canute and the team up there, amazing job. And that was a good news story that I will always remember. Thanks. So folks, that wraps up my presentation. I want to highlight we all have a role in terms of supporting search and rescue, providing evidence-based information, and making sure that when things come up on social media, we can support them. So if you're out there as a social media warrior, please do promote the accurate information founded by the Search and Rescue Association based on all those thousands of years of search and rescue experience for the volunteers across our province. And also to the mainstream media, I'll plug you. Please get yourself educated. And when you're reporting out on stories, which we absolutely love, see how you can support programs like the AdventureSmart education and prevention program so that we are getting the message out there to reduce the number of folks who need help. And if they do, they're not afraid to call for rescue, and we will get to them sooner so their injuries or need is not as severe. All right, any questions from the chat there, Scott? I see we're a bit over time, but I'm happy to stick around.
We actually pretty much answered all of them. I think the last question was from Tom, which was, where was there any situation that you've been in? And I think the answer, I know what the answer is, but was there any situation where you've been in where you thought, this is the one time that I think maybe, oh, I sort of wish we charged? Can you think of anything?
The answer you said no is obvious to my mind. I'm trying to think of a time where you go, the goal is to reduce people from making either unlucky decisions, or if they knew better, then they would have made a different choice, brought a headlamp on a late evening hike, wore micro spikes instead of running shoes, brought first aid or water or extra clothes, or those kinds of things. I struggle. I cannot think, nothing comes to mind where you would go, oh, charging them for that service would have made everyone go, oh, I'm now going to carry a water bottle or a headlamp, or have an extra device for navigation, etc. I cannot think of a single instance in all the search and rescue times and stories that I've had, because I'm very fortunate to travel around the province in different capacities. I struggle to think of any that would have improved the SAR service, made those folks smarten up, learn their lesson, whatever. I can tell you, every time search and rescue has gone out, that they learn their lesson already just by the need for search and rescue and seeing folks come out and help them. And then the gratitude that they express, like, wow, you do this for free and your volunteers. Like, it's just truly it's heartwarming to see the expression of gratitude.
And Newt brings up a great point in chat, which is that not only should we never ever charge, we go out of our way for very good reason to not make people feel bad about needing us. Like, they're already in a horrid situation by this time. Making it worse by making them feel guilty or something like that, it doesn't really benefit anyone.
No, and that's something that I think I know I've certainly come more aware of it. People like Neil Brewer, I see he's on the call tonight. Thanks for coming, Neil. Michael Coyle out of Coquitlam SAR, a very prominent social media person in search and rescue, has taken a lot of time and effort to say, hey, folks, shaming the subject is not going to serve any purpose whatsoever. So we can all do better in terms of recognizing, there's times when we're unlucky. There's times when it could have gone, the flip of a coin one way or another, and by the grace of whatever, we get away with it and someone doesn't. Should they be chastised on the 6 o'clock news in front of millions of viewers? I don't see that having any purpose, any value, it doesn't serve the goals that we talked about here, why people join search and rescue and how we're going to change behavior. So thanks, Scott. Any other questions, Sandra?
Excellent points, Chris. Man, you hit all the nails on the head, really, and it was insightful. Even though I've heard you speak 1,000 times, it's there's always something to learn. And that last piece is important, because I know there's a lot of engagement on social after there's been a search and rescue call. No matter where it goes in the province, we all have access to those conversations now, don't we, on social media? And I love the approach of many of the search and rescue volunteers we've got in BC in groups. We've got 78 groups, 3,400 volunteers. They're active and out there keeping busy. It's really helpful when they can take the opportunity to find that little gold nugget. So let's say there were 9 mistakes made, but there was one piece that was just right. And that can be focused on, that can be expanded on, that can be shared, that can be linked to the outdoor education pieces. So there's many ways to keep it positive and keep it headed in the right direction. Star call volume, I see that Scott's put up a little poll, and then respectful of your time, I think we need to wrap up, even though we can all continue here, but let's offer you some prizes and conclude after this question here. On average, how many search and rescue calls are there in BC? 1 or 2 a month, 1 or 2 a week, 1 or 2 a day, 3 or more a day? I know I tossed some numbers around, and so did Chris. So let's see where we go. 3 or more a day. Everyone was listening. Okay, 10 out of 10 for our audience here tonight.
I think it's actually interesting to see almost half of people thought it was less. And that sort of gives you an idea that the media really doesn't actually spend a lot of time covering all of the things. It's the reason, like, there are 5 calls a day, right? Across the province, if you take the 1,700 and divide it by 365.
And if we take a look at things like long weekends, there was one year there were 52 calls on the August long weekend, 52 search and rescue calls across BC in under 3 days. So yeah, those kinds of moments, you can tell people really enjoy getting outside during long weekends, but then that also sees an escalation in the number of folks who need help. And it's great to see they're calling and calling early oftentimes too.
Thanks, Chris. I think we have to wrap it up. Maybe, I know at times we feel that we how are we going to fill an hour, but we always easily fill the hour. And thank you for that, and really appreciate your time. I know you're a busy person, and thank your family for letting us have you this evening. We appreciate that. As we wrap up and close, don't go away too quickly. We have a couple of things to give away, but everyone who joined us tonight will receive 1 month free trial from FatMap. They've been great supporters and sponsors of our webinar, so that's always fun. We'll fire that to you. We've got your email and contact, so don't worry about that. We have 2 questions. We have 2 prizes to give away. The prizes will be TBA, but we know that one of them is coming from Helly Hansen and the other one's coming from BrightSource. BrightSource is a company that offers awesome lighting. Chris is familiar. He just nodded there. Great products for vehicles, personal use, and just a quality product. And if you're not familiar with Helly Hansen, but I think most are, we've got some prizing there from Helly Hansen. So we do this very nonchalantly, very easily. So everybody who's attending tonight, get your fingers ready, and you get to answer a skill testing question. Sorry, Chris, you can't play. You're just rubbing your hands together. You are not a part of this. A slight conflict of interest, just a baby one. So for everyone else here, I'd like you to tell me if you could recite them in the order that I talked about them. You need to type out what are, and Scott will tell us who answers first, what are the 3 T's? I say this in my sleep now. I think I recite this in my sleep, but yeah, it's a great one. It's an easy one to remember. And there we go. Oh, look at
Crystal.
Correct. Crystal gets a gold star for getting even the tense right. I really appreciate that from someone who has to type that a lot. Good try, Tom. Good try. You could have went TTT. Yeah, that wouldn't have won you anything. So Crystal, we'll reward you with a Helly Hansen prize. So the next question for anyone who's interested in winning something from BrightSource, I'd like you to think about, this might be a little bit detailed. Oh no, I'm going to switch it up. If you could tell us what one of the groups that Chris belongs to, that's a massive support to the GSAR community, to ground search and rescue. I'll give you the acronym, but you need to type it out, which I just did with the other one, didn't I? What does CISM stand for? What does CISM stand for? It's a lengthy one. And if you don't know, yes, this one might be a tricky one. Sandra might have to think of another question. Maybe this one might be only for industry people. Sorry.
To be fair, I actually put the answer in the chat earlier in the meeting when we talked about CISM and didn't define it. So I put it in there, and look at them go.
I've got to give everyone more credit, because look at that, you guys. That's awesome.
Tom got to the top of the list there. So congratulations, Tom.
Thank you.
Excellent.
2 winners. We'll be in touch. Scott and I are very quick at getting this information to you. But again, Chris, thank you very much. Thanks to all the participants who joined us. I know there was some from Colorado Search and Rescue joining us tonight. Wow. So thank you for for that. I was chatting on the sidebar here. And we really appreciate everyone, no matter where you were sitting this evening. We hope you have a great long weekend, if this long weekend applies to you,
Yes.
depending on where you're living. And have a safe summer.
Memorial
And
Day,
we
I think, in the
appreciate-
States.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah.
And we have a wonderful summer series coming up. I put that in the chat as well, but you can also find it at the BC Search and Rescue Association site. On behalf of the 3,400 volunteers in BC, 78 SAR groups, we thank you and we look forward to seeing you come back again. Enjoy your summer.
Good night, folks.
Take care. Great to see you all. Good night.